Welcome back to Azure Terraformer. This is episode 5 of our Multi-Tenant Azure App Service refactoring series, where we are taking audience code and refactoring it after the code analysis that we did. And this episode, we are going to be continuing mission on the client infrastructure, really finalizing all of the things that we need to do for client infrastructure, and should be setting us up good to expand and deploy additional deployments from here on forward. So if you're enjoying this video, please like and make sure to subscribe to my channel. Ring that bell so you know when I drop new videos. Thank you very much. And without further ado, let's get going. So while that's going, I should look at my client deployments here. So I like the client name business. I like the address space we don't need that anymore because we're going to go to the same subnet. We are going to use the same location. That's fine. We could put that in the client config up here and then just grab that from the location of the customer. Of course, we can't support a customer location that does not exist within our thing, within our shared infra, for sure. Database info, we're gonna have to look at that. Okay, so let's go look at the client deployment. Client deployment, let's look at the variables. So I think we got rid of that. We have the location. We don't have this anymore. We don't have that anymore. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now what can we deploy? Well, we got to clean this up first, okay? So this is no longer a root module, so the provider has got to go, provider declaration's got to go away. My IP, I really don't want that anymore. Let's see if my IP is used anywhere. So it's used for the storage thing, okay? So we have to leave that temporarily. Let's put storage in its own place. Just kind of organize this stuff. So this is all related to storage, except for that KeyVault thing. I'm going to get rid of that. Storage blob. Storage is going to a place. Network, we don't need the network. We don't need to create a subnet anymore. We do need to create a database. We need to get a reference to the SQL Server. I'm sure of that. We need to put the versions into its own place. So let's do that. Okay. So main is looking a lot more manageable. So we have a client name. I do not like the fact that the client name, that's it. We need something to tie this to the actual environment and application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy pasta this and put this on our client infrastructure as variables. And I'm going to put a Terraform.tfrs in the root module for the client infra, and we're going to have the same values in there. Except we're no longer going to have CR3, it's going to be CR3 client, okay? And that is going to be used as our prefix. And so now inside here, I think I want to actually pass in those values to the client deployment. Yes, absolutely. So the client deployment has the application name, the environment name, and the client name. And so here we go. We've got, so in our client deployment, we need these two variables to be passed in. And so now the naming for client is actually a combination of the application name, environment name, and the client name. So we're going to have CR3 client, prod, and then the client name, okay? And so now, what do we need? Well, we need to create a database. So let's see what we need to do that. So this database module, what is it doing? SQL DB. It's creating two resources. So I'm just going to move this out, and we're going to delete this DB module. It seems like unnecessary. So I'm just going to call this SQL msql.tf, and we're going to put the SQL stuff in here, and we're not going to mess around with it. So we're creating a network rule. Again, the most important things at the top, then subjugated little babies or children go below it. So the database is actually the most important thing. So now we need to get this SQL Server ID. Okay, so we can get rid of this module. I can delete this module folder, and our modules are like now trimming down, right? And we have a much cleaner structure here. So now we need to go get the database. Now this is actually super important, so I'm going to leave this data reference at the top. So this is our shared SQL Server. I actually really like the name of this reference, right? So this is our shared SQL Server. Now, what is the resource group for this shared SQL Server? Well, if we go look at what we've deployed, we have a shared SQL Server, and it's in this resource group. So now we can take this hard-coded value. I'm having a hard time copy pasting. We can take this hard-coded value and we can dump it in here. And now we have to ask ourselves, what things are going to change? CR3 shared, will that ever change? Well, a CR3 client is always going to use CR3 shared infrastructure. So that'll never change. Prod, will that ever change? Yes. In fact, we have a variable called environment name in the client deployment that changes whether it's dev or prod or whatever. So we need to have a var.environment name to replace that. Then, will the location change? Yes, it will. We have a variable for the location, so we may want to pick a different location. So let's throw that in there, var.location. There we go. And now, what is the name of the SQL Server? Well, if we go look at our SQL Server and we plug that in here, we just go through the same formula. And actually, it's going to be completely identical. And now look at that. So now, very clearly, we can go grab the SQL Server ID from this data source using the SQL Server shared from the right region, from the right environment, from the right application. Of course, we all know what application we're in, so we don't have to worry about that. So now the question becomes, do we actually need to have the database SKU information and stuff like that, like passed in by the client infrastructure here? This is all kind of hard-coded, so I'm going to leave that for right now because that's working. So I really don't have a problem with that. If you want to do that, whatever. Now what we need to do is we need to update this network path. So we have the SQL Server ID. Now we need to go get the subnet. Okay. And I'm actually fine with the client here, but wait a second. This is for the SQL Server to grant it access to the subnet. So this doesn't even belong in here. This actually belongs. This is a shared infra problem because we need to grant the SQL Server access to the subnet. So now we are in the context of the shared infra regional module. The SQL Server is no longer a data source. It's actually this main resource, and the subnet is actually a resource now as well. And so now here we are. We've got our application subnet, and we put the ID in there, and we don't need to give this the client name. This is just the application rule, right? For the application's access to this network from the access to VNet. Okay. And we are probably going to have to, my lord. What happened here? Database password. We had some little, let's try Terraform fly again. We got to add the network rule anyway for the SQL Server and the subnet. I wonder if this is a network access thing. I mean, I am using my local IP address to grant it access. So I'm not authorized to view these contents. That's pretty interesting. Oh, so I must have missed that. So in the KeyVault, the setting was to use role assignments, not access policies. So I did not notice that. Enable RBAC authorization. So let's set that to false. I hope that doesn't cause a recreate. That would be a bummer. I totally missed that attribute. It was, and I moved it around. But yeah, enabling RBAC access control. Nothing to destroy, so we can do an inline update. So this is going to allow us to create those access policies. I suppose I could use role assignments. I'll have to check if that's best practice these days. Okay, so that's in good shape. We have deployed our secrets, I believe. There we go. I can see it because I'm actually the Terraform user. So there you go. So now let's go check our deployment here. So in our client deployment, we're just deploying the database. We're deploying a storage account. And I think the last thing I have to refactor is the storage account, where we're creating a storage account, we're creating a blob, and we're creating a network access rule, and we're creating a container. So here again, the principle that's being applied by the original author is I can use a shared SQL Server and have a separate database for each tenant, but I'm going to create a separate storage account for each tenant. Doesn't make sense, right? The same principle should be I'm going to have a shared storage account, and then I'm going to have a container for each tenant. So I'm going to apply that principle the same way that they did. So I'm going to move this into my shared regional infrastructure, and we're going to create something called storage. And there we go. So I have my storage account, and that's going to be my main storage account. I am going to use a rando. Actually, I may not use a rando. I may use the location index to make it easy to pick this region, to make it easy to pick this storage account out. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So storage accounts are the worst in terms of naming. But if you have a very tight naming convention, you can get it done. No hyphens are allowed, all lowercase. And so we need to get the var.location index, which is that number. And then just to make sure we're not like borking ourselves here, we need to, set this to low. I think it's lower. I think lower is the method that I'm after. To make sure everything's all lowercase. And this is application traffic. And this is going to be a lot like the SQL Server rules, basically. We're going to have our subnet, and we're going to have the IP address. So it's in KeyVault. So it is in this file. So I can put this in here. It's no longer a var, it's like just a local. And let me move this out of KeyVault because it's no longer just being used by KeyVault. It's being used by, it's just a general network thing. So I'm going to throw this into the network configuration here. And then I'm probably going to move the client config. I don't know if this is ever used by anybody else. We'll have to look at that. But and we're going to have to fix this. So storage, we're going to go grab the main storage account. We have a problem. So we do have a hyphen. So how do I get rid of the hyphen if I have a hyphen embedded in my application name? Well, I can use this method. I have to go look at this method. It's called replace. Yeah, so replace. You pass in a string, you pass in the substring, and what you want to replace, the substring you want to find, and what you want to replace it with. So I'm already passing in lower, so I'm going to pass the results of lower to a replace method. I'm going to replace the hyphen with an empty string. Yeah, should be fine. Okay, and with this change, I think I can finally put the nail in the coffin. Well, not complete. I need a container per client. And once that's done, I can get rid of this. So in storage for my client, all I need is this, the container. And that's going to be main. And now I can get rid of blob. Okay, and so now, just like my SQL Server, I'm referencing a shared database, so to speak, but instead of it being a shared SQL Server database, it's actually a shared storage account. So I'm just going to grab the storage account. So this is our shared storage account. The shared storage account, the resource group should be the same, but the name of it is going to be much more condensed. It's going to look like this, and it's going to use the location index. And do I have the location index here? I don't, so I'm going to need to make sure I pass in the location index. And when I declare my my deployments here, I just need to make sure I pass in the location index. And I have to make sure that the location index, this is actually not, so this is not right. This is the index of the client. I need to actually set the location index on the client configuration. So this is going to be location index 0 and the location index 0 because it's actually going to be the same thing. So now I just say location index and I'm good to go. So my shared infra, I think, is already done. Now I just need to test out my client deployment to see if I can deploy all my clients. Yep, good. Now I'm expecting errors here because this is the first time we've ran init on our client deployment infrastructure, our client infra. So far, so good. So you notice we're doing 2 client deployments, client deployment 0 and client deployment 1. We're creating a resource group for each, a database using our shared SQL Server, and a container using our shared storage account, all within the same region. If the region of our client changes, we need to have corresponding infrastructure in our shared location to get that to work. And with just a few code changes, I'll show you how we can make that happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do that, why don't I try and get the web app going? So the web app, here we have KeyVault access policy, and I think this is going to be on the web apps. Okay, so we're creating interesting, using the system ID of so the original author was using role-based access to the KeyVault, but here they were using the access policy, which was not going to work. But I think they hadn't quite gotten this web app thing deployed yet. So that makes sense. So I think we're good. Let's grab this web app And we're going to put this into our client deployment. Now we need references to get this thing to work. So we have to go get our shared infra-regional, the app service plan. Yeah, so we just need a name and a resource group. And again, this is going to be super easy because we know what the things are. The resource groups are going to look a lot like this. So the resource group name is going to be that. The name of the app service plan is going to be ASP. And I think that's it. So now we have our app service plan just by using a data reference. And HT, this is all fine. I'm fine with this. Now we need our app insights. Now the database password and all that jazz, this is where it's going to get pretty fun. So I actually want to give this thing a system assigned, not a system assigned, but a user assigned identity. And now I can actually create a KeyVault access policy to this KeyVault and grant that user, this user assigned identity, access to the KeyVault. We're now giving the client access policy the access to these things. And let's create a depends on here to make sure that we depends on this. So we need to have the access policy set up here in order to do what we're about to do. And so now what I want to do is, instead of putting in these values here, right? I want to put in I want to put in a KeyVault reference. And so this is what you're looking at here. So instead of having the actual like value there, we're going to put in this kind of magic string here. The vault name is going to be the vault name. And then the secret, of course, I need to know what the secret is. So I can just set that to be database-username. And now the value that I want for password is going to be pretty easy as well. And it's going to be database-password. Okay. And now this is actually going to look up those values out of KeyVault. And so now the database URL, I should be able to get that from my SQL Server here. So if I go grab that, and I have no problem putting the database URL actually like in the value of it there. And it was probably in the original code base under the module for database. Database URL. Looks like they were doing a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know. But this seems like the more appropriate way of doing that. And then the storage account, I've already got my storage account here. Okay, so I can just as easily, these are data references. So I can just as easily reference my shared storage account, shared, and then name, and then actually I don't know what the blob endpoint is. Let's see if it helps me out here. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go see if there is a blob endpoint. Primary blob endpoint. Okay, yeah, that'll work. I mean, nobody commits this stuff to memory, right? So now the blob storage key should be there. And we'll call this storage key. I don't know if we actually stored the storage key there. We'll have to go check the KeyVault secrets. So it looks like no, but we could easily add a storage key. and we're going to use the primary access key. There we go. There we go. So that's going to put the key out there for our shared infra. Now we can go and do our client infra. Okay, what else we have here? KeyVault. I think KeyVault should be location index, right? The Terraform provider is apparently doing some validation on that data, so the data source to our KeyVault, and it checked, and the name was too long, so it's just like, nope, that's not a valid KeyVault name. I'm not even going to let you do that, which I guess is kind of makes sense. Okay, so we are creating these apps. We're going to go and check these out once they're done, and I think this should put an end to our refactoring session. Okay, let's go look. And there we go. So we have this set up here, and we've got our app service out there. And let's go look at our configuration. And our KeyVault reference is broken, so we'll have to go fix that. That was exciting. Unfortunately, we still have a little work left to do to fix our KeyVault references. Please join me in my next video where we crush that bug and we finalize and expand on what we've done thus far. You're not going to want to miss it. If you're enjoying this video in this series, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also ring that bell so you know when my next video drops. Appreciate it. Until next time, this is the Azure Terraformer.